Since taking over Afghanistan last year, the Taliban rulers have reintroduced draconian restrictions on freedom and movements, particularly directed at women, that are reminiscent of their last regime in the 1990s. Increasingly though, over the last few weeks, the Taliban leaders have announced many new restrictions, even as criticism and international pressure mount against them. Afghan women and human rights activists are staging a series of protests against the Taliban tactics to crush their rights.
I request you all to please stand up for a few seconds and keep silence for the pain that Afghan women are suffering in Afghanistan. Please.
Afghan human rights activist Zarifa Ghaffari opened her discussions at the Geneva summit few days back with a moment of silence for the women who are suffering in the war-torn country. She ended her speech with a message to the world and Taliban by saying, "You can't win without us." Women in Afghanistan and outside the country are protesting against Taliban's reversal on education. Recently, Afghan women in Bamiyan ripped down banners at an event organized by Taliban when the group refused to talk about education. Even as Afghanistan's Islamic Emirate continues to deny education to girls beyond the 6th grade, more than 24 top Taliban leaders are educating their daughters at schools in Doha, Peshawar and Karachi. The leaders include Health Minister Qalandar Ibad, Deputy Foreign Minister Sher Mohammad Abbas Taniqzai and spokesperson Sohail Shaheen.
It's now 8 months since the Taliban take over in Afghanistan and girls are not going to school. Activists are in hiding, families remain torn apart. Everyone has a responsibility to change that, and before all, clearly, Taliban leadership. So this goes to you. In August, in your famous press conference, you promised to respect women's rights and media freedom. And now, for 200 days, girls are banned from going to school. This is self-sabotage on a national scale, and we all know that many of your daughters are actually going to schools and universities abroad.
Islamic Emirate leaders claimed last year that in addition to problems related to curricula and uniforms, they lacked funding for schools. In January, though the US Special Representative for Afghanistan, Tom West said it would pay all teachers' salaries if schools were reopened for girls. But it seems that the de facto rulers of the war-torn country are not willing to do so. The Taliban have repeatedly expressed the expectation that the international community will recognize their authority as the new government of Afghanistan. But the group has done very little to demonstrate a willingness to meet the conditions put forward by Western powers and some regional states on the issue of women's rights. Since returning to power on August 15, the Taliban have rolled back 2 decades of gains made by the country's women who have been squeezed out of many government jobs, barred from traveling alone, in order to dress according to a strict interpretation of the Quran. The crisis for women and girls in Afghanistan is escalating with no end in sight. Therefore, many leaders and human rights activists demand that the Taliban government shouldn't be recognized by the world as they do not treat people, especially women, humanly.
I want to be very clear that EU does not recognize the Taliban government and provides its support outside government channels. So I think it's really important to remember that we don't work with the government. We will continue to facilitate women's active and meaningful participation in the dialogue on the future of Afghanistan, and we will not accept that girls do not have access to quality education.
International recognition is one of the few remaining levers by which the United States and other countries can exert pressure on the Taliban government. The more that countries remain united on how they employ that lever, the stronger it is.